Content of everything. Content of everything. Content of everything. Content over everything. Very good channel. Excellent channel. Yeah. Now Kyle is starting. Kyle is very good. He gets a lot of views. Kyle. Yeah, I'm done.
Content over everything.
Like, don't say my name.
So do you know that I do not believe Lord Activist Right said that power corrupts, or power tends to corrupt, is what he actually said. That I don't believe that's true. I think what's really true is that corrupt people are attracted to large amounts of power. Corrupt people who are already.
But that means you're going to fall into the thing, if we just give the right people the power, that's what you're going to say.
Not necessarily. Yeah, a lot of people say this. We don't need to transform society. We just need to get the right people in power. We just need Jeremy Corbyn in power. We just need whoever. And there is some truth in that. There is some truth in that. Individuals can change the course of history a little bit. Someone like Jeremy Corbyn, I think, could make a more humane country. A little bit more humane than what Theresa May's doing. However, overwhelmingly, history is driven by social events on a massive scale, to the point where individuals are just really vessels for that expression of power. So yeah, deciding, oh, we just need someone different in power. This man rather than that man, or this woman. That's not really how history works. People have a more conservative mindset. They believe that history is driven by great men, and maybe a few great women as well. They believe that that's what really changes the world. Individuals, heroic individuals, bringing the truth to their society and rebuilding it from the ground up. People like Lenin, or the Prophet Muhammad, or Napoleon. It doesn't really matter. The point is that these men are supposed to be the drivers of history. But it's wrong. And if you look at, just for a few minutes, about how the world really works, think about it. It's completely false. These men come at a certain time when they're needed, when they're desired by the population to lead them forward.
What about like men ahead of their time, like in mathematics or physics?
Maybe they're ahead of their time. So someone like Newton, for example, he probably did speed up the process of discovering calculus. But I think it would have been someone else, like Leibniz or someone else, would have discovered it at some point. It's the same with evolution as well. You had a very famous socialist called Wallace. And if Charles Darwin hadn't published his seminal book, Origin of Species, a few months later, if he had published it a few months later, then Wallace would have published it, and you would have had a very different, but it would have been the same discovery.
Democratize the monarchy.
Ah, no, you're asking about my sign. Yeah. Can everyone see the sign? My lovely audience today. Yeah. Can you read it?
Did you only have two colours when you did that? Or?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I didn't want to use red. Red is such a stereotypical socialist colour, I thought. That's right, my friend. Yeah. That's right. Now, we don't discuss the monarchy in this country enough. It's usually discussed in a jokey kind of way. It's never taken seriously. But it's a very serious thing to be in 2019 and to have a modern, technologically advanced country like Britain still have a monarchy. That's a very interesting...
Off with their heads.
Off with their heads? No, not off with their heads.
Yeah, the guillotine.
No, we don't need to use violence to get rid of them.
I agree.
We tried that about 300 years ago and it didn't work. So trying that again is not going to work, I don't think.
Democratize it.
So when I say democratize the monarchy, what do I mean by that? I don't mean open up the monarchy so everybody can be a king or a queen.
Why not? Why can't we all get the queen around?
Although with modern technology, we could all live like kings and queens. We could all live like aristocrats.
We already do.
I'd say we do. Compared to maybe what you see hundreds of years ago, yes, but
we already do.
We could live even more luxurious lives if we just harness the power of automation and robotics and artificial intelligence. Now, the monarchy when I say the monarchy, I don't mean the royal family. So I don't mean, open up the royal family so anybody can be in the royal family. What I mean is the monarchy is a system of government. The United Kingdom is not formally a democracy. It's not even a republic like the United States or France. It's a monarchy. It's a parliamentary monarchy. And I think the sooner we move towards a really democratic society based on directly democratic citizens' assemblies, we'll have a more rational society, a more happy society. This island of people will be more happy. They'll be more empowered to take part in the decision-making that affects their lives. And we'll have less irrational treatment of other countries like Venezuela, Iraq, Syria, and Palestine. Just to name a few examples of countries that we've helped to interfere with.
What about other democracies that behave badly? Aren't there?
What about them? Yeah.
So, like, I mean, would us becoming more democratic make us have a better foreign policy?
Not necessarily. Take, for example, Switzerland. It's the most democratic country in Europe, and yet it's not necessarily the most progressive in its behavior or its treatment of women. I mean, it's pretty good now, but it took about, I think they only got the vote for women in the 1970s in Switzerland, right? Even though it's very democratic. It was, and very, I mean that in the accurate use of the word, real participation in making the decision. Not just voting for a prime minister or a party every few years. However, yeah, I mean, yeah, being democratic doesn't necessarily make for a good society. Look at ancient Greece, for example. The treatment of women and slaves and foreigners was terrible. By today's standards, it was awful.
Are you damned if you do and damned if you don't?
No, you're not damned if you do. But having more democracy would be better. It would open up the potential for a more rational foreign policy. So the way that the United Kingdom government treats other countries, I think overall is terrible, really bad. It's either very exploitative in relation to the third world, or it's very violent in relation to the Middle East, and now with Venezuela, it's very interfering in that country. It doesn't have to be this way. Most British people are very peaceful people. I don't think they want this. They don't want to have continual violence and aggression in the Middle East. If you look at the run-up to the Iraq War, most people were against the Iraq War before it happened. I mean, we're talking here about a demo that happened yesterday with 1 million people. The anti-Iraq war demo was about 2 million or plus even. I wasn't there, I was only a child, but I'm able to... I wasn't there, I saw it though, I was going through Hyde Park and I saw the demo yesterday. Now, what happened was, the government went and invaded anyways, right? And then when they started to put British troops on the front, in the front lines, right in Afghanistan and Iraq, right in the Middle East, then British people, they started to support the war because they didn't want to look like they didn't care about people putting their lives on the line, right? But I think overall, British people are very peaceful people, and they don't want to see interference in the Middle East or in Venezuela. Overall, I don't think that. They have to be whipped into a frenzy by the media, by the mainstream media. They have to be whipped with fear of weapons of mass destruction, or fear that somehow the current leader of Venezuela, the democratically elected leader, is, a ruthless dictator acting in a genocidal manner. They have to create this hysteria in order to get the British elite to do what they want to do.
How would you democratise the monarchy?
So how would I democratise it? Well, one way to do that, there's an introduction to this idea in this book called The Politics of Social Ecology, Libertarian Municipalism. So libertarian municipalism is the idea that every town, every village in England should have its own assembly.
Well, it
or
does.
in any country, it doesn't matter.
It does, they're called local councils.
Now, local councils, we have local councils in Britain, in the boroughs and the towns and so on. But these are elected bodies. The kind of bodies I'm talking about here are directly open to the citizenry of that town.
Well, the Mayor of London holds regular meetings to which anyone can go.
Of course, the Mayor of London holds regular meetings. But when you go to the Mayor of London meetings, you're asking questions and you're hearing answers, but you're not making the decisions about how London really works. The kind of system I call for would be that where the British people at the local level make the decisions.
And how will that work?
Well, let me give you an example.
How will that affect the monarchy?
Well, we wouldn't need a monarchy with that. I mean, the royal family itself, I think, would just become a normal family again.
Yeah.
Maybe for the sake of ceremony, they could have some privileges.
Do you think the royal family get too much attention from the press? I do.
They get too much. You know what? They get the wrong kind of attention as well. The mainstream media, the tabloids especially, they focus endlessly on the monarchy as a family, not as an institution. They obsess over the soap opera aspect of the royal family. But they never talk about how irrational the institution is and how it affects our constitution in Britain.
Can I ask you a question about that word? What does that mean, democratise?
Democratise, yeah, like I said,
I've never heard of that
devolve power to the local level. So, local people making the decisions and then mandating recallable elected representatives. Well, they're not even representatives, they'd be delegates to carry out the will of the assembly.
That would be a fairer system than what we have now.
It would be much fairer, my friend. More just, more free. In fact, that's real freedom, in my opinion. Real freedom is when you have a say in making the laws that you live under. Real freedom is not when you just do whatever you want. It's when you get together with your community to decide the rules by which all of you will live collectively, as a neighborhood or a town or a village. And then going out to the wider level, we talk about regions and whole countries and across the world.
Counties.
Counties, and yes, exactly.
That's what you mean by regions, counties.
Sure thing, yeah. So,
Is this your website?
yeah, if any of you would like to have a look, I have a monthly study group meeting in Fleet Street in the City of London. I meet with a group of friends and we read and we discuss ideas like this book, and it's open to everybody who wants to join in. You don't have to pay. And there's tea and coffee.
Excuse me, whereabouts in Fleet Street is it?
So it's do you know St. Bride's Cathedral, the one that looks like a wedding cake? There's a very famous church in London. It's the Journalists' Church. It looks like a big wedding cake. We're just next to that. So literally just at number 88 Fleet Street. But if you look on the website here, London Communalists at wordpress.com, yeah, you can find it.
Communalist, that's another word I've never even heard.
London
What's a
Communalist.
communalist?
So a communalist is a person who believes in the philosophy that I'm trying to espouse. Not a communist. Not a communist. Communalist is
I can tell you're a really decent guy. No, you seem like a really decent, like, sweet person, like, and it's really great that you're doing this.
It's very encouraging.
Like, that you're telling people about this, because I'd never heard of that.
But if you can I ask you something? If you were to live in a really democratic society, what would you? How would you like to see England really behave?
I'd like to see people kind of, like you say, like the local people who live in the local areas, making the decisions of how they would like to see their community, like how they'd like to see their local community, rather than not be involved in like making decisions. I think it's much fairer to have local people making local decisions about where they live, wherever it is. So, you know, I think this is really good idea. Like, what does democratise mean?
Democratise means make into a democracy.
Make into a democracy.
So
don't we already live in a
democratisation. Yes, of course, we call our society a democracy because the elites in this country understand how propaganda works very, very well. The United Kingdom basically invented a modern form of propaganda.
Islamic people here?
Sorry?
Why are there so many Islamic people?
Islamic people?
Have you ever wondered?
Well, I mean, there's a connection with empire, of course. In the 1950s, Britain opened up its borders to a lot of immigration, and so a lot of families settled over here.
Do you ever wonder why there are so many Muslims here? In this country?
To be honest, it doesn't cross my mind that much. Although I live in this area, so I know.
Do you ever kind of hijab or the burqa and think, well, why are there so many people that are Muslim?
Do you know what I think when it comes to Islam or any religion, I always think it's up to you as an individual. If you want to wear a hijab,
no, I don't mind.
If you want to be a nun and wear a...
I don't mind what they wear. I'm just curious as to why there are so many people from the Middle East that have kind of come.
Like I said, they might have family connections, they might be refugees, they might be fleeing a crisis.
They could be living in a really, really
hot country.
Sorry? They could be living in hot countries.
A hot country, but it could be a very dangerous country as well. I mean, if you're living in Palestine, where your country's already been reduced to rubble, you might want to come here.
I had a friend
it's a bit
from Sri
safer.
Lanka years ago, and he was fleeing a war zone.
Sri Lanka, there's another example.
Can
I tell you something? Yeah, Sri Lanka was a war zone, and this is an amazing testament to the power of propaganda. The United Kingdom was a big participant in the Sri Lankan genocide of 2009. I remember I was a young child. My teacher at school, she told us there's this terrible genocide going on. The Tamil people of Sri Lanka are getting killed by the majority Sinhalese people. And they're getting gunned down in helicopters and all kinds of stuff. Now, not many people know, but Britain was selling a lot of the weapons to the Sri Lankan government right up until that genocide happened. And then after that genocide happened, they were so shocked at this that they sold them even more weapons. And it wasn't even just selling weapons. There were UK mercenaries there's a firm in the UK called KMS, Keeny Meeny Services. They were there flying helicopters, bombing Tamil civilians. In total, about 40,000 Tamil civilians are thought to have died as a result of this, and the last remaining 1,000 Tamil tigers died as a result. That is for me, as someone living in the UK, as someone who cares about the reputation of my country, I find that quite frightening. That happened, and David Cameron went to visit that country when he got elected, and there was no word about this in the media. The UK media had absolutely nothing to say about this participation in this atrocious act of violence. I think, again, if the British people really knew about this, they'd be horrified. They'd be disgusted. That the UK government was happy to let British firms sell weapons to a genocidal regime, killing its own people, in the name of creating a more harmonious state.
How long ago was this?
If you'd like to find out more about this, there's two academics who study this. The first is T.J. Coles from the University of Plymouth, and the other academic, his name is Phil Miller. Phil Miller wrote a book called Britain's Dirty War, Britain's Secret War Against the Tamils. If you want to find out more about that, I recommend it. This is recent. Empire is not finished, my friends. It formally finished in the 1950s, but it's still going in an informal way today.
I think a lot of the time though it's private arms.
Private arms deals. But remember, the UK arms industry can do nothing without the support of the government. They can do nothing.
Private
They have to provide licenses. Whitehall has to provide a license for every arms sale that goes out of Britain. Every time BAE Systems sells weapons to Saudi Arabia so they can massacre Yemeni civilians. Every time Britain sells Euro Typhoon fighter jets to Indonesia to wipe out East Timorese people. Every time Britain backs a civil war, such as in Nigeria or in Northern Ireland, for example, the government have to be aware of it. They have to be aware of it, and they have to provide a license. So at the end of the day, really, Britain is not a capitalist society. We have certain capitalist institutions, and they're allowed some free reign, but really our main manufacturing industry in Britain, weapons of death and destruction, things that are not helping the world at all, not improving Britain's role in the world whatsoever.
We didn't do it. Germany, France, and America would still do it, though.
Yeah, this is the argument of Boris Johnson. He says, if we don't sell weapons to Saudi Arabia, then someone else will do it. Yeah, and I always think this is the logic of a crack dealer who stands outside a school and says, well, I'm going to sell crack to these children because I'm a nice crack dealer, you know, and the other ones are not so nice, and I care about these kids. That's how I feel when I hear Boris Johnson saying that. Boris Johnson doesn't have many qualities to, you know, but that's surely not a great quality.
Would you rather the Germans, the French, or the Americans be in charge in that situation?
Well, it's irrelevant, my friend. I'd rather no one be selling weapons to Saudi Arabia. This is a brutal, bloody dictatorship.
Outcome? I'm not talking about your ideals. I'm talking about what's the more desirable outcome.
What's the more desirable outcome? The more desirable outcome is that no one sells weapons to Saudi Arabia.
I agree.
It's okay to say
in the same way, we contain countries that behave badly, rogue states that are violating our values, basic British values, French values, American values, freedom, peace, international law, and so on. In the same way, we sanction those countries that do that. We should be sanctioning Saudi Arabia right now. Problem is, we're so addicted to oil, we're so addicted to the devil's excrement that we have to keep working with this violent regime, which is basically ISIS, but as a country. And I'm not saying this out of ignorance, everybody. I've actually been to Saudi Arabia. My father used to work there for the government there, so I've been there and I've spoken to people there. And now young people in Saudi Arabia are becoming a bit more conscious of this, but they're too frightened to do anything about it. The level of surveillance and the high level of training that the Saudi Arabian National Guard have is very intimidating, so they can't do much. Maybe in Egypt you can do something here and there.
Should we ally with Iran instead?
Excuse me?
Should we ally with Iran instead?
That's a black and white fallacy. You don't, just because you're choosing to reject Saudi Arabia doesn't mean you have to ally with Iran. Iran is another dictatorship which is not treating its people respectfully. You know, I know a woman lives down the road from me. She happens to be, she's an artist. She happens to like painting pictures of beautiful naked women. And now she's fighting to go back to Iran because of that. That's not a good regime to be friends with.
So who should we support in the Middle East?
Who should we support in the Middle East? Well, I think we should support the Kurds in northern Syria.
Yeah.
The Kurds in northern Syria. This is a remarkable experiment in direct democracy and women's liberation. By people you'd expect to be unable to do anything. They're living in Syria, which after North Korea is one of the most totalitarian states in the world. Yet these people in the north of Syria, these Kurdish people, not just Kurds, but Christians and other groups as well, have managed to create a small society of 3 cantons, one of which has been invaded by Turkey recently, but the others are still pretty much stable. Based on direct democracy, based on respect for women. They banned polygamy recently. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, they banned polygamy.
They banned polygamy. So you have women now who go around encouraging women to come to the assemblies to take part in decision making in that local area.
But is polygamy a good thing? I don't think so.
To be honest, like now I'm going to make a value judgment here. As someone, I'll just be up front, I was raised a Christian, although I'm an atheist now. I don't think polygamy is such a good idea. Because if you actually look at polygamous societies, they do tend to... I studied anthropology at university as well, so I looked at a lot of polygamous societies in Burma and in Africa. I don't think they tend to really... There tends to be a lot of conflict. I mean, there's already a lot of conflict in a relationship, any kind of relationship, between a man and woman. But there's a lot of conflict when there's jealousy between different wives, when you've got some of the wives made to do some things, and some of them are not, allowed to do that. That creates conflict. But again, I'm going to say that it's up to the women to decide for themselves. They think that's okay.
Do you ever go on YouTube?
Do I ever go on YouTube? Yeah, sometimes.
Because I looked up a really interesting documentary about the Mormons, the Latter-day Saints.
Yeah, I went to see the Mormons yesterday down the road.
But
even the Mormons are realizing now that polygamy is not 100% great. They're starting to move away from I think they're slowly starting to move away from polygamy
but
now.
it still carries on. It
Yeah,
still
of
goes
course.
on in certain places.
It's a more like.
But I don't really
you know,
believe. I don't really agree with it myself.
You've got to ask. There's a specific context for why polygamy happens. So in the Arab world, you had polygamy during a time of very intense warfare, where there was. Remember, the Middle East is at the confluence of a lot of great empires. There's a lot of conflict and violence and warfare. And it's a very harsh environment. And so yeah, there were at some stages in their history there were a lot fewer men. So polygamy became more of an understandable approach to take, right?
Yeah.
Humans are very adaptable. They endlessly adapt, depending on their needs and their desires. To meet their human needs, they will adapt. Women, men will adapt. And so today, I think when we live, I just don't think it's an appropriate way to live today, to be polygamous. When you don't need to be.
What problem did the Kurds have with polygamy that they needed to outlaw?
Well, a lot of the women in that part of Syria, northern Syria, it's called Rojava, if you want to look it up. The women in that part, they believed that polygamy was oppressive, so they tried to change that. They went around and they said to women, you don't have to be like this.
Are we talking about polyandry or polygyny?
Polygamy.
Polygamy.
I'm not talking about those other
polygamy is the
things.
general term. Are you talking about one
There's only one example. As far as I know, there's only one example of polyandry in the world, and there's a
Eskimos.
I don't know about Eskimos, but in Burma there's a tribe of people, again for very specific reasons. When a woman marries a husband, she marries all of his brothers as well. But it's more of a
Inuit as well.
It's a
Have
very
you ever thought it might be
but
to
it's a
do with
formality.
Two examples.
It's to do with control over land. It's not. Remember, it's a very agricultural society, and in that particular environment, they worked out a way to.
They might need to produce more people.
And you know, this thing about men and women and numbers and stuff, I think it's a big explanation for what happened in the 60s and 70s, when women, for the first time in the West, it's not just the pill that was making them experiment with casual sex. It was another thing as well.
LSD.
After World War II, there were a lot of dead men. There were not as many men as women, and so women to attract a man or to stay with a man, they had to put out more and they had to become more sexually open. And I remember reading about this because I find this part of history fascinating, what happened after World War II to Britain. Because Britain went from being this hyper-masculine, macho society, clean-shaven, short hair, very regimented, militaristic society, and you had suddenly people growing their hair out and the kind of flower power sort of stuff, right? And yeah, a lot of prostitutes were very upset about this, you know, because they were angry at these women, like, why are you giving away casual sex when you could be selling it? You know, why are you giving it away for free? They were horrified by it. But yeah, women became more, because there was more women than men, a little bit more women than men, and that makes a difference. In a society like England, very emotionally closed and so on, it makes a difference when there's a few more women than men. That makes a big difference. That changes the whole culture.
What about when there are more men? What happens then?
Well, no, now it's roughly balanced. We've come back from the baby boom and we've balanced out again.
So basically, prostitution
so it's not really
should be legalised.
It doesn't really make a difference. In fact,
what about
I'd
a
say
society where a bunch of migrants come in and they're all men?
There have always been more.
all migrants. Where's the evidence that all the migrants come into England?
I never said there was. I'm just asking a hypothetical. What happens when you have migration from
I don't know.
another
It's a good
nation
question.
that's mostly
But you
men?
might see a more militaristic society. I don't know. It really depends on so many different factors. You're studying culture. It's dizzying. It's not like studying frogs or atoms or. If you want to study culture scientifically, it's dizzying. The array of things you have to think about, the factors involved. What I just said about women becoming more open sexually, that's just a speculation. I don't have any hard evidence for that at all.
Right.
If I was to be really scientific, nice to meet you, man. Take it easy. See you. Yeah, even I don't want to make this man feel uncomfortable. He's leaving. But that handshake, you know, and you see our men, they slap each other on the back,
That's good.
and they, now you see a lot of black guys like fist bump each other and stuff. That's I always think that's very masculine. If you look at Shakespeare's day, they would be horrified by that.
The very ones who are
During Shakespeare's time, men would kiss each other on the cheeks when they saw each other. You know, it was a much more relaxed and gentle society. It was less warlike as well, I think, than Britain is today. Shakespeare's time, they were like, they would kiss each other on the cheek when they saw each other. It's like Italy today. Italian men today are like that. Sorry, mate?
I think it was a much more warlike society.
You think so?
Yeah, I mean, Europe was gripped with wars throughout the 1600s.
Europe was gripped with war, my friend, for sure, but it was always isolated. So when England fought the Netherlands or Spain, it was always for a few years, and it was,
What about with the English Civil War?
We're talking here after World War II. This is a mass slaughter. I mean, Europe committed suicide twice, or tried to. 50 million people died in the First World War, just alone. And then about 25 million people died after that of the Spanish flu, because there was not enough public health care to look after them because of the devastation. Right? This is a level of violence which is unheard of throughout history, that mechanized mass slaughter. And the fact that English mothers were willing to send their sons off to die like that I mean, that would put the Spartans to shame, that kind of treatment of men. Just to let them just get in the trenches, just fight. You know, what Mussolini said about living in a trenchocracy, it very much explains why fascism became, in the countries that fought World War I, like Italy and Germany, explains a lot about the rise of fascism.
World War I.
You know? A lot of these English guys who came back from World War I and II, they would go on to suppress riots in Northern Ireland. They were very tough. I mean, I know about this.
Italy was on the winning side in World War I. They took the Südtirol from Austria-Hungary.
Sorry?
Italy was on the winning side in World War I. They
right.
sided with the Allies. They got the Südtirol, the Dolomites from
right.
Austria.
Okay, my mistake. My history's not perfect.
Yeah,
sorry.
they changed sides because they wanted...
Let me tell you something interesting about the fascists in World War II. Not many people know in Britain.
They changed sides because they wanted Istria and Croatia.
Britain did not win World War II because of its manpower or its superior fighting spirit or even its tanks or its Spitfires. It
was on the winning side because of Russia
It won it
and
because of
America.
code breaking. It won it because of code breaking. That was the main reason they won. They were always one step ahead of the Germans. The second thing people don't really know about World War II, and they really should know, is that Britain did not win World War II. It's remarkable how many British people think that Britain won World War II. Shows you the power of propaganda. Again, we come out with endless historical movies in this country. They're either about bonnets and about the monarchy and the aristocracy, or they're about World War II often, right? Or they're Shakespeare reenactments.
Or Roman epics.
And the ones about World War II, you see them endlessly, and gives that impression that we somehow won World War II. But the reality is that America won World War II on the Western Front, and Russia won it on the Eastern Front. Britain had a relatively small role compared to those two countries.
China won the war against Japan.
And I would say as well, another myth about World War II as well, another myth, was that America did not need to drop the bomb on Japan. Japan was already ready to surrender. If you look at, there's an American-Japanese historian, I should try to remember his name, but he's written very carefully about this. Hirohito, the emperor, was ready to surrender. In fact, Russia was going to invade Japan with America jointly.
Yeah.
The plan was to wait a few more days and then invade. Take back Manchuria from Japan.
The Russians had already taken
Japan had
back
taken over a part of China.
They were in
Japan had taken over a part of China.
And they were about to invade Hokkaido.
Right.
That's
so
why
what
the bomb
happened
was
is that the Americans decided to drop a bomb on Japan just to show the world what power they had. It was a power show. That was really what it was about. It was completely unnecessary.
Between the two bombs, though, they had a chance to surrender, and they didn't. You know, the first bomb was dropped, and the Japanese.
They did surrender instantly. They almost instantly surrendered. The second bomb was even even more egregious. If you think about that, even more egregious. And they used a form of terrorism, the Americans. This is psychological warfare. Do you know what they did when they dropped that first bomb on Hiroshima? They also dropped leaflets in Japanese saying Japan has surrendered, when Japan hadn't formally surrendered. You're right, they hadn't formally surrendered. That's a form of psychological warfare, to lie to a country and pretend that it's surrendered. That is completely a form of warfare. That's psychological terrorism, if you ask me. Now, the other myth about World War II, I'll tell you. The other very interesting myth, can't remember. This idea that Britain was very staunchly against fascism at the time, and America as well. This is not so true. There's a very good book I recommend by an author called Peter Day called Franco's Friends, and it's all about how MI6 basically helped Franco to get to power in Spain as a bulwark against the communists. MI5 as well paid Mussolini £100 a week, that's £6,000 in today's money, paid him £100 a week to write anti-communist articles in Italy. That shows you the priorities of Britain. They were more frightened of communism than fascism.
What are you saying about that beloved royal family?
I'm sorry, Bobby. No, you know what? I'm not against the royal family as individuals. They're just people like you and me. They're normal people.
The Duke of Windsor was pro-Hitler, though, wasn't he?
I've got no issue with them as people. It's the institution,
was pro-Hitler.
It's the institution. It's the largest style of government we have. The fact that we live in a constitutional, parliamentary monarchy in 2019, I find is really interesting to me. Very, very unnecessary, very inappropriate to an advanced country like Britain. And there's this myth that somehow this promotes unity between our countries and these islands is also a big myth as well. And if you look at the Scottish referendum, do you think they particularly cared about the monarchy when they voted for they almost came very close to voting for the referendum to leave.
They wanted the Queen to remain
head of state. We have a Queen, and yet we are one of the most divided islands in terms of our national heritage. You know, it doesn't make any. I mean,
Spain, Belgium, Holland, Norway, Denmark, and
why
Sweden.
Is it? It's very interesting. Spain,
Liechtenstein,
Belgium, and Britain. The biggest countries with monarchies in Europe, and yet they're the most ethnically divided.
Sweden
and they have the biggest.
monarchy?
They have the biggest nationalist.
Norway.
They're not divided.
I said the major European countries.
Sweden is quite
that for me
divided.
is very interesting.
Major European country.
That's it. It's quite possible.
Belgium's like that.
Not geographically, but in terms of its weight and importance in Europe.
You can't
Very
alter,
important.
you can't alter Flemish
Sweden
and
is a
Walloon.
divided society.
But a lot of these Flemish want to leave. It's very interesting.
Maybe just this
But you know, nationalism is I think nationalism is, I agree with what Albert Einstein said. It's the measles of mankind. The measles of mankind.
Liechtenstein has a monarchy, the last part of the Holy Roman Empire to remain.
It's obsession with nations.
Luxembourg.
I think a civilization which is growing up, the Western civilization is supposed to be recovering from the savagery of World War II. We should be growing beyond nationalism. We should have seen what it did earlier in our history. We should move beyond that.
Mr.
Transcend
Speaker,
it.
there were European wars in every generation from ancient Greece until 1945.
Yes, there were European wars in every generation since ancient Greece. Yes, there were. I never said that Europe's never had wars until the 20th century. I never said that. But they never had wars on the scale of those wars in the trenches and from bombings. And they never had, you know, someone like Bomber Harris going to Hamburg and just firebombing whole women and children and old people. People had nothing to do with the war. That mentality, I think, was quite unheard of in the medieval period. You look at the medieval England, when medieval England fought against France, you didn't see that kind of violence to women. No, knights had a code of chivalry when they treated women. They treated them with respect.
It was in the ancient world. Look at what the Spartans did to Athens.
The only exception was when they took over a city. When they took over a city, they would exterminate the people who resisted. But that's unusual.
The killing of Wat Tyler and all his rebellious.
Wat Tyler?
Yeah, that was massive brutality.
Yeah, but these were mostly men who rose up in Wat Tyler's rebellion.
It was like that in the ancient world. Look what the Spartans did to Athens.
That was brutal.
Look what the Romans did to Carthage.
I'm just saying that warfare wasn't so mechanized. It wasn't so
You're
generalized.
the Roman expert. What did the Romans do to Carthage?
Yeah, destroyed it.
What if the monarchy allows us to exercise our kind of natural taste for kind of semi-divine leaders, but in a safe way? You know, like if it was only democracy, wouldn't there be a tendency to turn our Prime Minister into a kind of godlike figure, and wouldn't that be dangerous?
No, you're making a good point here.
Doesn't this permit the kind of traditional liberal balance of power that Britain is famous for?
No. You're making a very interesting point about this country. The reason why we don't need a written constitution is because British people...
have one.
We do need a written
codified 1689.
That's not a constitution.
Or a codified document. We don't have a code in the way other countries do in Europe.
We should have.
The reason why is because we trust our institutions so much here. We don't really need to have it.
I think it's the opposite.
We don't need to have it written down explicitly. At least that's how the majority of British people feel. They don't feel a need to just read a piece of paper like the Germans or the French or the Americans, to read a piece of paper to see that. And yeah, we have this obsession with our institutions. You know, if you're a conservative mind, I'm not myself, but there are a lot of people like that. And a lot of these people worried, well, if we don't have the monarchy, then where's all the ceremony going to go? Yeah. State ceremony. It's going to start being loaded up into prime ministers.
Yes.
And that's very worrying. You saw someone like Tony Blair, he started to do this. He started to try and attract a lot of the ceremony onto him. He wanted to be there holding the casket when Diana died. He wanted to be there in the limelight. He was crying in Parliament. This is something British people never do, especially English men. Crying in Parliament. They've never done that for hundreds of years. And he started to do that because he was trying to attract that attention onto him. Right? He was trying to take some of that ceremony onto him.
Mr. Vanity.
That's shameful.
But Tony Blair is a non-entity.
If you have any understanding of English institutions, you would never do something like that. You would leave the monarchy to be itself. It's a part of life which is separate from Parliament. It's a part of the state which British people like to celebrate separate from that. Yeah. Now, admittedly, the monarchy is dying because of tabloids and all the crap. You know, it's starting to lose its mystique slowly but surely. But I think there's a good case to be made maybe for a democratic monarchy.
But how?
No, I'm saying a democratized monarchy. As a compromise, we could have a monarchical democracy. So we could have the monarchy as a symbolic, historical, living museum piece. But then in reality, the people of England would have the power, and the people of England would make votes in a communalist style assembly at their local level. And remember, when I say democracy, I'm not talking about parliament or local councils. I'm talking about local assemblies of the people, directly face to face of neighbours, villagers, townspeople, deciding how they want their country to be run at the local level, the very grassroots. But that's really what I'm saying.
If we start to elect the monarchy, then
no, we wouldn't have an elected monarchy because that's not a real monarchy. So we wouldn't have that.
What do you mean by democratise it?
When I say democratise the monarchy, I'm not talking about the family.
So what do you mean, sorry?
I'm not talking about the royal family. I'm talking about the style of government that we have in Britain. So I say we need to change our constitution from one based on monarchy to one based on democracy. And by democracy, I don't mean a parliamentary representative system. I mean a face-to-face, direct,
like the Areopagus in old Athens.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, but let me just say something. If you know anything about,
I'm gonna get down from my ladder now, ladies and gentlemen, because my voice is getting quite sore. Thank you so much for listening to me. I hope you have a really nice day. See you.
hear me out on this. If you know anything about Japanese history, from the Battle of the Sekigahara Crossroads, Tokugawa.
Content over everything from your man, say it straight. Man, don't listen to BBC. Man, don't listen to ITV.
Contagious diseases. Ibn Masud, and according to his companions, yes. According to his companions, yes. What do you know about hadiths? I've read 2 that are rated Sahih. Okay, when you're a scholar, you can go to Jamiat Tirmidhi and Dar es Salaam, and you can try and grade this hadith as weak if you want. But scholars grade this as strong, authentic. Okay, so if you want to become a Quranist and